Today, we will talk about XLM, SHX, and XRP ties to talk about how they have been connected from the very start, including Stripe and what is now called XMoney. Today, we will primarily be talking about Stripe, Facebook, and X, and how they are tied into Stellar and even Stronghold. And that is mainly because of all of the recent developments about how Meta, formerly Facebook, is retrying their crypto payments aspiration. It appears as if there have been some statements online that I have no idea where it actually came from about Meta actually wanting to acquire Ripple, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense, especially because of all of the ties into Tammy Camp of Stronghold and her experience working with Facebook while at Stellar, on top of Meta actually hiring a Stellar executive. Here is Tammy referring to the Stellar and Facebook experience.
Come and be our first head of growth at Stellar, and that's how I became a professional in 2014. In the blockchain. So I was the first head of growth there. We put on I think 4 million users there in a little over 4 months, and at that point that was a lot of usage, and so it kind of we knew we had to kind of rewrite the software to kind of take that capacity.
It is incredibly hard to find any information out there that refers explicitly to the Stellar involvement with Facebook at that time. I found one and now I can't find it again. However, the important thing is that Stellar and Facebook have a lot of experience together, and it's really convenient how all of these PayPal mafia ties are coming into the picture again. On the topic of XMoney as well, there are a lot of ties with Stellar. In fact, I've done probably 5 or 6 pieces of content on the topic, and I probably have at least another 2. But it has been confirmed that it will start in 2025, which won't just be related to payments either. It sounds as if the X platform itself will actually change to look more like WeChat or whatever it's called in China. That is essentially what X is trying to become. It has also been reported that you will actually be able to earn interest on your value within the XMoney platform itself, which sounds a lot like stablecoins and being able to earn a yield off of it, which is an extremely hot topic at the moment. There is also a reported cash back feature as well, which also probably ties into the yield bearing stablecoin as well. One of the things that relates to the Genius Act and how it is moving along in the government now, one of the issues that caused certain politicians to not want to vote in favor of it as is that it was indirectly allowing Elon Musk to create his own stablecoin. In all honesty, I hadn't really thought about the platform having its own stablecoin. It didn't really make a lot of sense to me when they have a ton of PayPal mafia connections into Stripe and PayPal who have either their own stablecoins or they are integrated with people like Paxos. However, it sounds as if XMoney is being intended to, in one way or another, provide banking for the unbanked, which is one of the things that Stellar always talks about. To get a little bit more into why I think Meta specifically will be even more connected into Stellar than they were before, is that they decided to bring on Ginger Baker, who I believe is currently an advisor at Stellar. I actually haven't checked the website. However, it is called out here on the Stellar site. There are a lot of people out there who want to make Solana fit each and every application, and this one isn't really anything unusual. Now, I have kind of changed my mind on Solana over time, and I do see it improving and being used in a lot of applications with compliant stablecoins and it being integrated into a lot of stuff. With that said, the specific case here where we're talking about a Facebook stablecoin or payment network pretty clearly points directly at Stellar just because of who is involved now, who has been involved in the past, and all of Stellar's interconnected financial technology and financial service partners. Coming back to Ginger, she started at the company as a VP of product and has a lot of experience in fintech and payments. She came from Plaid most recently and still serves on the board of the Stellar Development Foundation. In an article, there were specific comments around the integration of stablecoins. Right now, it seems like USDC and USDT. However, if they choose to create a platform that is comparable to XMoney, where it is actually kind of appearing to be working towards having its own stablecoin, then the Plaid and Stellar connections that go right back into the PayPal mafia, Stellar, Stronghold, Stripe, PayPal, it's got a ton of stuff there. Here is an article on it where it pretty much reviews everything that I just showed on the screen, and Stellar is the only crypto related company called out here, which is not to say that it will be the one or it will be the only one. However, it is really lining up that way. To speak a little bit more on the importance of Plaid, there are some pretty interesting PayPal Mafia and Stellar connections there too. So Plaid named a former Meta payments executive as a new lead. A John Anderson went from Facebook head of payments to Plaid and to PayPal. And then you have Ginger with her direct Stellar and Plaid experiences. And if you combine all of that, then it could look something like on the front end, you've got a Meta payments network, which expands across Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. You would have some kind of a Stellar network related infrastructure there just because of who all's involved. And I am sure that eventually, or even immediately, it could work with things on Solana as well, but it's pretty obvious that Stellar is important here. On the connectivity to handle the payments being sent to creators, you can easily hook in there because of Plaid. And to top it all off, MasterCard and Visa helped fund Plaid as well. And you've got Stellar and MasterCard working directly together to create its own payment network, and Visa has a common Stellar partner in Plaid. I have jumped in between XMoney and Facebook here, but that's because XMoney was able to take what Facebook tried in the past and was shut down when a quote-unquote crypto stablecoin wasn't really a popular term. And we just had the progress on the Genius Act regarding stablecoins. So it really seems as if these two payment networks are walking through the same things at the same time. And they each have a ton of ties into not only the PayPal Mafia, but specifically into Stellar. And a lot of that comes back to Elon. And I won't spend a lot of time on that because I have talked about it in a few other PayPal Mafia videos in the past, but he and Peter Thiel were involved in the creation of PayPal. And that was originally called X.com. So that name has been changing around for a long time now. And Peter Thiel is involved in Ripple and Stellar, and then he's in Stripe, PayPal, the Founders Fund, Palantir, and OpenAI, which the CEO of OpenAI is also an advisor at Stellar. And I believe the CEO of Palantir might be, or he's been involved in the past, which I forget off the top of my head, and I didn't even intend to actually comment on that. Specifically on Elon, though, he's trying to revive the original goal he had of creating a payment network or an application that was called X.com, and now has Starlink, which is able to provide connectivity almost anywhere, and it's expanding every day. And he's so involved in the people who went off to start Ripple, Stellar, Stripe, PayPal, all kinds of other things that would be required to have a very large financial and payment infrastructure. One other thing that I believe I have commented on in a previous XMoney video is that the creation of X payments, or XMoney as it's called now, will essentially require anyone who is using the payment network to go through a KYC process and, in short, create some kind of a digital ID. So that will be the on-ramp for tons and tons of people out there who wouldn't have gotten involved with that at this point in time. And to make some kind of a Riddler comparison or two, the logos for X and Grok are remarkably comparable to XRP and XLM. An interesting point here, this is actually a developer for Stellar, and her comment was that you could use a Stellar powered payment network to charge for posts on X, and that would reduce tons and tons of spam. And I just think that it's really interesting that that specific comment would be made, and there are so many connections in between XMoney, and Stellar. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but one of the big reasons why it's much easier for Stellar to get associated with these kinds of things is because that they do not individually need the kinds of licensing that a company like Ripple does. And that is because they are a quote unquote non-profit who is just creating the Stellar network and maintaining it. They are not trying to profit directly off of the network itself, which is unlike what Ripple is doing. So the people who connect with Stellar, such as Stripe or MoneyGram or whoever else, they would take care of their own licensing, which makes it much easier for Stellar to actually concentrate on the infrastructure and expansion itself. Speaking of that, XMoney as of April 10th is up to 41 out of 50 or 51 if you count Washington, D.C. MTLs. So they are on their way to being able to outright provide payment services in the US. Now, I want to run through the Stripe interconnections specifically here, but I don't want to spend a ton of time on it because I do want to concentrate on this topic on its own here soon. But one of the interesting things from Stellar's 2024 conference was that Stripe announced that it was using Stellar as a payment rail. And I found it really convenient that Ginger Baker was actually in this talk. And then you have Stripe's interconnection with Bridge to create their own stablecoin, which comes right back into Stellar as well. Stripe is a lot bigger than a lot of people actually think. It has 1.4 trillion of transactions a year, as well as Stripe and Patrick Collison being extremely interconnected too. Stripe actually bought, I believe it was 2% of the XLM supply back when it had 100 billion. It was like 2014 or 2015. And they actually hold all of that still. He is also on the board of advisors at Stellar. You also have a interesting connection with Stripe and Ripple as well. I honestly haven't explored that just because it isn't as obvious, but I wouldn't be too surprised to see some kind of integration there. Stripe is also incorporated with Velo, which I want to talk more about Stronghold at this point. And that is not just because Tammy worked with Facebook while at Stellar, but it's also because of the Canadian connections into Stronghold. Mark J. Carney, who is now the PM of Canada and was heavily involved in banking, was coming on to the board of directors at Stripe in 2021. And Stronghold picked up 222 Labs in 2024, who was a Canadian nonprofit that was concentrating on helping companies and institutions and whoever make the technological changes to comply with the ISO 222 messaging standard. A lot of sites call it out as being in the US now because of its acquisition. However, its headquarters was, and I think still is, in Canada. It's extremely interesting that Stronghold has released its new Stronghold Pay API, and that ties in directly with what is being talked about right now with XMoney, and Plaid looks to be directly called out in that too. On top of that, Stronghold is the only crypto payments or the only crypto company who is a preferred member in the Payments Innovation Alliance. And Plaid is too. And the two of them have a lot in common because they are concentrating on ACH payments, which would be what an XMoney or this Facebook payment network would have to hook up into. It's got one more thing that actually relates to Circle that I found interesting. Now, it has an interesting URL, and if you squint hard enough, one could possibly interpret that as Stronghold X API. So we will have to see on that. The next thing that I will concentrate on here soon is Stripe and Stellar. And of course, it'll come right back into XMoney and the PayPal mafia.